What are you doing with all that money you are making as a business owner? Are you blowing it on stuff that really doesn't matter, or are you putting it to work for you? Our special guest helps entrepreneurs in different industries fix their finances, learn how to invest, and then buy assets to create passive income. And today I am going to pick his brain to extract as much value as I possibly can for you. Hi, I am Tim Fitzpatrick with Rialto Marketing, where we believe marketing shouldn't be difficult. All you need is the right plan. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in. I really appreciate you. I am super excited today to have Paul Halme with me from Combat Business Success and Peak Performance MMA. Paul, welcome and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Tim. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dig into this, man. You have a really interesting past that we will get into. I know you're going to have add a ton of value here, and we're going to talk about successfully investing as an entrepreneur. We were talking before we jumped on air here that there are so many entrepreneurs that are just sinking all of their money right back into their business, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If your business is growing, you can't get returns like that anywhere else, but you have all your eggs in one basket, which is not necessarily a good thing, right?
Oh, 100%.
So before we dig into it, I want to ask you some rapid fire questions, help us get to know you a little bit. You ready to jump in with both feet here, Paul?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. When you're not working, how do you like to spend your time?
Traveling.
And what's your hidden talent?
Hidden talent is helping people get past, limiting money beliefs and understanding that they can have as much as they want.
It's a good hidden talent to have. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Man, this is one I got from a super rich friend, is like, never invest in anything speculative unless it's the amount of money you're willing to set on fire in your backyard. That saved me a lot of time.
Fantastic piece of advice.
It's huge.
What's one thing about you that surprises people?
I played golf in college.
Yeah, you don't look like the typical golfer.
Yeah, I look a lot different than I did back then.
What does success mean to you?
Man, quality of life. It's all about quality of life to me anymore.
Isn't it interesting how things change? It wasn't always quality of life for you, was it?
No, it was hustle and make as much money as I could and buy a bunch of cool stuff and travel. And then you get a little bit older and your kids start getting older and you're like, I just want to enjoy things.
Yeah. My path has been very similar. So it's kind of interesting how things change as you get older. Where's your happy place?
On an airplane at about 38,000 feet. I don't know. It's like my escape place is, not now. I don't like, pre all the rules and everything, but it was like,
yeah,
that's my favorite place to go, is just get on a plane, fly overseas business class and just disappear. It is the best feeling because there's no internet, nobody can talk to you, and you just you lose yourself in yourself. And I highly recommend it once the world opens back up.
Yeah, now the planes are starting to get Wi-Fi and you can start to access everything. But for a long time, it was forced unplugging, right?
Oh, it's the best. Yeah, because literally I never take my laptop out of my bag. I just enjoy and just disappear, and it's amazing. My favorite.
What qualities do you value in the people you spend time with?
Man, honesty, drive, and just fun to be around.
Love it. So I touched on your professional experience. Tell us a little bit more about just your history, what you're doing now, types of businesses you're working with and helping.
And it's been crazy. Got out of college, playing golf, moved down to Texas with my best friend who was trying to get in the UFC at the time. And the UFC was just in infancy stage. Like, I got to hang out with Dana White and Joe Rogan because it was such a backyard sport. No one really paid that much attention to it. So I was working as a stockbroker, and then my best friend got in the UFC, started winning, won the Ultimate Fighter 4, started traveling a bunch. And then he's like, oh, you should open up a gym. And I'm like, I don't know. I got this corporate gig I like. And then I was like, oh, it just kind of kept pulling at me, and then ended up opening up a gym, got good at running a gym. Then I had like 4 of them at one point, and I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And then people started asking me for advice. And then another of my friends was like, let's start a consulting company. And we scaled that up until 2020 when things got a little hairy. So it's definitely been interesting, being able to consult for, different businesses and different industries, and then helping gym owners grow their gyms. And then my main thing is like really teach people the importance of investing and looking at a long-term plan. Cause I talked to a lot of people, and unfortunately they're in their 40s and they're like, man, I need to get started. And I'm like, oh boy, it's going to be a tough conversation.
Yeah. So they don't have any money saved away.
Not usually, because in this industry, it's tough because most of them don't have a 401k. They never worked for a company. And if they did, they were in their 20s and they have a little bit of money. So people in the gym world don't talk about investing. They don't talk about retirement plans, things like that. So I really try to educate the people on the importance of getting started, start now. And people are like, oh, I should have started 20 years ago. And it's like that old saying goes, yeah, you should have started 20 years ago or now. It's the best time.
Yeah.
Like, just do it. And, because the human body and all this stuff with science, and then you follow like different podcasts, they're talking like, this generation is going to live to be like 110 to 120 years old, theoretically, the one that's just being born now. So it's like, you might not start investing till you're 40, but you might live to be 100. So, in 30 years, mathematically in 30 years at 75, anybody you go from zero to a millionaire from age 45 to 75, although obviously you want to live longer than that.
Yeah. Well, gosh, and the other thing, if you think about it, if more people are going to be living to 100, the typical retirement age as it sits now,
it's going up.
That ain't going to work for a lot of people, is it?
Mm-mm.
They're going to be working a lot longer. Otherwise, they're going to have to be saving a hell of a lot more money than they are now.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So, let's dig into this. What are some of the biggest issues that you see from a business finance standpoint with the companies that you're working with? What mistakes and problems are they running into?
The biggest one is kind of twofold. It's cash flow, because a lot of them, they got into the business because they're good at something. People are listening to this are probably maybe they're good at sales, or they built a widget, or they run a gym, or they came up with this clothing line and they're good at that. But then they're like, well, I just won't think about my finances and it'll be okay. And it's like, no, you can't do that. You have to embrace it. So the first thing I tell people is like, you'd be surprised how many people don't have a consistent P&L, like a good bookkeeper, a P&L, all the basic things that a real publicly traded company has. So I tell them, as first thing is I tell them is to treat your business like a publicly traded company, although you're never going to get your gym on the NASDAQ, but treat it the same way. You get a P&L, you go through your P&L, you look at it, you sit down with your wife or your business partner, you go through the P&L, like, oh, this looks good. This is good. Okay. We did this, we did that. Okay. Then you start to get an understanding of like, okay, there's a lot of money coming in and there's a lot of money going out. Like, what can I do to fix this problem? And so when they start getting an idea about cash flow, you see like this light kind of go on in their head. They're like, whoa, wait, I could do more things. Like, yeah, you have a bunch of money coming in and it's all going out. It's like, so figuring out where it's going, things they can do, how they can increase their cash flow, and then what they can do with that. And that's like my big passion, is teaching them. Like we talked earlier before, is like people want to dump all their money. And this is the biggest argument I get all the time. People are like, well, I get the best returns, put all my money into my business. I'm like, well, that's great. But if something goes wrong, like using the gym example in 2020 or 2020, sorry. When things got shut down, I was like, okay, hey, granted, you can't run your business. So it's like, okay, this was bad. And I had friends that had no money put away, no lines of credit established. I was like, you guys are in a lot of pain. For me, it was like, okay, got my lines of credit. I can go to this phase. And then I don't want to touch my investments. So I really have to, but I'm okay. And I can make it X amount of time. But just teaching them about the core basics that they can't put all their money into their business.
Yeah. Well, my guess is, correct me if I'm wrong, how many of the people that you were working with had more than 1 or 2 months of operating capital in the bank?
Hardly any, only like our higher level clients do, because I've been harping on them for years. So we started consulting about 5 years ago. So like the people that have been with us a while, I'm pretty hard on them. I'm like, you need to have a business emergency fund. You need personal emergency fund. You need a business line of credit. Because I try to explain to these guys, because I survived 2001 as a stockbroker, and then I survived 2008 as a new business owner. So, and like when things are bad, no one wants to give you credit. You will not get a line
exactly.
Of credit. It's a nightmare.
The time to get a credit line is when you don't need it.
Yeah, that's what I did. It's like I have a line of credit, and I never use it. I take that back. I use it so they keep it open, but I'll use it and then pay it right back off. But when the shutdowns happened, I was like, okay, cool. I've got operating capital for X amount of months, and then you have to go into investments if I have to. But luckily, it didn't get that bad. But the peace of mind that I had versus some of my friends and colleagues was like, it was terrifying. Some of them went and got jobs. It was
Yeah.
like they were like, I'm going to lose everything.
Yeah. How much operating capital, and when for those that don't know, when we're talking about operating capital, it's the money. If revenue completely stopped, how much money you need every month to cover all of your expenses.
Yep.
How many months of operating capital do you think people should have? And this obviously is going to depend on how conservative you are, but
Oh yeah.
what are
Yeah,
your
for
thoughts
sure.
on that?
A lot of people don't have any or barely any. So, I kind of go back to the old school, emergency fund, 6 months business expenses, 6 months personal expenses. It's a good round number.
Yeah.
But then some people, if they're being more aggressive, or like me, I'm a little bit older now and I'm trying to create other cash flow opportunities. So I'm like, man, I don't really want to tie up 6 months worth of money. So what I do is I try to keep about 3 months, but then I have 6 to 12 months in a line of credit that I can access, instantly online. So
Yeah.
I keep that, around that number, but I'll mess around with it depending on what I need to do. But for the average person, man, if they get a month, you see this big weight off their shoulders, like, oh my God, I can breathe. It's like, okay, now you got a month, let's get to 2. And then like, okay, this is now then they start freaking out. They're like, there's too much money in my account. And it's like, don't worry about it. Just, you'll be fine. And then at that point, then I teach them, hey, establish lines of credit, go to your bank, get well known. We learned that the hard way. Is I'd always used big banks. And when all the government stuff came out, all the big banks hosed us, the little guys. I
Yeah.
had to and luckily I had a friend who was super successful, and he was like, hey, I'm gonna give you this person's name and number. She's the VP of this community credit union. I'm like, okay, for what? And he goes, because they're the first ones that are gonna give the money out. And I'm like, really? And literally I got rejected from, I was with, Wells Fargo for since I was a kid, and they were like, finally, like a month into the thing, they were like, oh, hey, you might qualify. I'm like, I already got money from the community credit union. So it's like, now I have a relationship with the credit union where I know the people by name, and that's a big thing too. So that's another tip for people, is like, even the size of your business, is get to know your local banks. Cause man, the big banks, when things went bad, they didn't care about us at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I think it was in 2008. Some of the banks started pulling lines of credit. So
That was terrifying. Yeah. And that's one, I'm glad you said that. Cause that's actually, I had listened to a podcast. I forget who it was, but he was talking about, like, he was in that industry in 2008. And he said, when COVID happened, he's like, do you have a line of credit? He goes, take the money out and put in your checking right now. And I was like, what is he talking about? He said,
yeah.
I didn't realize I went and looked it up in 2008. If you had a line of credit, the banks just zapped it. They were like, okay, you can't use your line of credit. But if you already took it out and had it in your checking account, then it's like, well, it's already out.
Yeah.
But that was
Yeah. And
scary.
at least you have it if you need it, and you can always pay it back. You're going to pay a little bit of interest, but
Yeah. But
yeah.
peace of mind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So one of the things you touched on when I first asked this question was just, gosh, you got to look at your profit and loss and your balance sheet at least on a monthly basis, right? What are there particular things that you recommend your clients look at each month in those statements? Otherwise, because I think for a lot of people, they may just look at it and they're like, well, it's just a bunch of numbers. What the
Yeah.
hell does it mean?
And it's a lot of numbers too. What I always tell them, obviously now we're in a really weird time, but before, I always say, look at your P&L, look at what you did last month, and then compare that to last year. And you want to see that number going up. Although the last 2 years, everybody's P&Ls are just blown to,
Y-
it's
Yeah.
like my banker was like, oh, basically we're starting over this year. I was like, okay, whatever. She said, because they don't want to see, it was weird because they don't want to see income from 2019 because it doesn't make sense anymore because the numbers are so, entrepreneurs felt the pinch the last 2 years. So I tell them, is like, okay, look at your, your month. Did you beat last year? Okay, good. Look at your expenses. Did you spend more than last year? If you did, why did you spend more money? Okay, what? Oh, it was expansion. Oh, it was new mats. Oh, it was travel. Oh, it was this. Okay, cool. That's workable. And then profits. Like, how much profit did you make this month? Because what I'd like to teach people to do, and it goes back to like my days as a stockbroker, is the end of every quarter, you do a distribution. So, and obviously talk to your accountant. I'm not a CPA, none of that stuff, no legal advice. But I always talk to my accountant. I'm like, hey, I'd get my W-2 wage is this much, and she's like, okay, this is your W-2, your S corp, so you can take an owner draw up to this much, and so I take that out of the profits, but I treat it just like a corporation. So like my wife and I'll sit down, like, okay, for January, February, March, we did this in sales, this in expenses, this in profits. Okay, this much should be in our savings account for the business. Okay, cool. 50% of it is gone. It's out of the company.
Yeah.
And I move it over to my investment accounts without doing anything. And if people are like, oh, what if I really need that money? You can go find more money, or worst case scenario, if you had to, you can move money back, but you don't want to, because you want to keep building momentum, because money, when it moves, compound interest, money doing things.
Yeah.
If you just leave money in a savings account, you're going to have like nothing, because inflation is going to eat it alive.
Yeah. Especially right now.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
So this leads into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the best way for people to start investing. And one of the things you just touched on is, hey, at the end of every quarter, look at, you're paying yourself a salary, but take that draw to get money out that shouldn't be in there or doesn't need to still be sitting in there. And you said something really powerful. You move that right into your investing account. So this isn't going into your spending bank account.
Mm-hmm.
It's going into an account where you are using that money to invest. That's huge. But what else do you have to add on that?
Yeah, it's a game changer, because we'll spend the money. Like my wife has no problem spending the money. It's like, oh, we're going on a trip. I'm like, oh my God. So that's why I tell people, you have to budget in all those things, budget in the trips, budget in the travel, budget in dinners, budget everything into your business, and still run your business, be profitable. Then you have to take that money out. And I tell people, it's like, you can't, when I tell them, like, you have to have the investing account separate from your bank account. Like, I don't want to log into my business account and see my investing account. It's at a different firm. I have to go to a different app, to a different login. And to me, once that money's left my company, it's gone. It's not to be, but it's also too, like, one thing I've really worked hard on, and I really try to teach people, is I don't spend it. Like, that money's earmarked for the future. So it's like, it goes in. First thing I do after talking to my CPA and getting our plan for the year is, okay, we're going to fund the IRAs. We're going to fund the health savings account. Okay, we got this, and this. Okay, once I hit that, then what else can I do? Okay, then I can do a little bit non-retirement, or one thing I've started doing now is doing private equity deals into other businesses. After the pandemic, I was like, man, I'm going to get involved in a lot of different industries.
Yeah.
But the best way to circle back to get started investing is just do it. Like, literally, like, people joke around, like Robinhood gets a bad rap because of, that people are like, oh, they're doing this with their orders, they're doing that with their orders. I mean, it's still a good app. I mean, I'm not going to say use Robinhood, but it literally is the easiest app I've ever seen in my life. Like, when I worked back in the day when I was a broker, people call up and they have to pay like $50 a trade, and we're like, oh no, go online, it's only $19.95. Now it's free. So I mean, it's like, and the cool thing is, you have Robinhood, you have Schwab, you have TD Ameritrade, you have Fidelity. They're all free now. Like, they don't charge anything for the trades. And then people are like, well, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, just start researching stuff. And one of the hacks I give people is, like, just watch CNBC all the time. Turn off CNN, turn off Fox, just watch CNBC. You'll be so much smarter, and you'll understand. You'll hear things like, the good examples. My wife didn't go to college, never any interest in finance, things like that. But over the years of just being around it all the time, like, literally she'll text me like, oh, hey, Netflix is about to report earnings. And, and I'm just like, oh my God, I create a monster. It's like, she understands more than most of my friends, because it's always on. We're always trying to learn. And then the biggest thing is, you can look at, like, study Warren Buffett. He talks about how, most people can't beat the S&P 500. So just invest in the S&P 500. That's his recommendation, not mine. And obviously he's way smarter than me.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't, from an investing standpoint, you don't need to overcomplicate this. I mean, if you really do want to keep it simple, you can, and go from there. I mean, at this point, the S&P 500 is a pretty diverse mix of companies. So
I know people are like, well, I don't want to invest in one thing. I'm like, it's literally 500 companies, and they kick out the worst ones.
Yeah, and they're all huge. They're doing business across the entire world. So it's pretty diverse, but if you want to make it more complicated, you certainly can, right? I mean, you touched on private equity, investing in other businesses. There's, obviously you have people investing in cryptocurrencies now. You have people starting to look at NFTs. One of the things you said though, in my rapid fire questions was speculative investments.
Oh yeah.
And do you have any thoughts on Yeah, because look, I don't necessarily think having speculative investments is a bad thing, but I do think it should only be a certain percentage of your portfolio. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. That's the best advice when I go back to it is like, okay, when crypto was big, it's like, okay, how much will I put in here that if it goes to zero, oh, that sucks. Get people are taking out lines of credit and refinancing their house. That's a whole nother animal. It's like, that's not disposable income.
Yeah,
So like I dabbled in crypto, the first run up and down, and then, I kept buying some and still dabbling a little bit, but not to, amount where I'm like, oh my God, if we lose this, my wife's going to kill me. And then of course I got into NFTs because that was the next hot thing. And I was like, of course I got jinxed. The first NFT I bought like went up 5x. It was like, oh, I'm a genius. I got this all figured out. And then like the next 10 all went to zero. And I was like, okay, I'm getting close to the number that I do not want to set on fire in the backyard. So I actually cooled off a little bit on NFTs because I kept getting caught up in the hype. And then it was like, oh, and it was like physically kind of draining and mentally where I'm like, this is kind of frustrating because it's like, it's hard to figure out. We're in the early stages, like Gary Vee and Be Friends, and there's some
yeah,
huge projects which I believe in that have a lot of utility and things like that. And there's other ones that are just like, like even Gary, he's like the king of NFT education right now. And he talks about how like most projects are going to go to zero. There's no utility behind them. So
yeah.
now I'm kind of studying his stuff, watching his things and avoiding buying a bunch of cheaper NFTs, thinking you're going to hit a bunch of home runs. And then it's like,
Some of the stuff I see happening with NFTs right now just reminds me of a bubble. Like people are spending insane amounts of money for artwork, and I'm like, who is the artist behind this? Like
yeah,
this person was totally unknown, 3 months ago, and now they're selling an NFT for whatever, 10 grand, 50,
no, it
$100,000. It's
gets
like, are
nuts.
you kidding me? So obviously a very speculative space. That doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. You could make a lot of money, but it could also go to zero, like you
Yeah,
said.
and I dabble in the NFTs just to learn the technology and everything because like they talk about like when you follow Gary Vee, it's like we went from Web 1.0, 2.0, now this is Web 3.0, and we're gonna even if these NFT projects, a lot of them tank, there's gonna be so much education that you're gonna understand because when all this stuff gets adopted and the blockchain gets used for more and more things, it's like it's the future and it's coming. So it's like you better learn it.
Yeah.
So I consider it like investing in my education on the NFTs that have gone bust. I'm like, well, I learned something there.
Yeah. Yeah. uh, so it's hard to have a conversation about investing without talking about passive income. Um, is it really attainable? If so, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I 100% believe it's attainable for people. It's just the problem is it gets such a bad rap because everybody's like, oh, I'm in your 20s, create some stuff on Instagram and then, create passive income. And you don't have the assets to do it. And then the people are trying to create and rush and do all this weird stuff when it's like really it just comes down, like you and I were talking earlier before the call, it just comes down to fundamentals and basics. It's like, what is a basic investment strategy? Okay, you're doing your IRAs, you're doing your retirement accounts. Okay, cool. Literally, when you get to whatever age you want to retire at, then you go talk to your advisor, or you talk to Schwab or Fidelity, and you create an income plan. And they're like, okay, cool. You're going to get this much money every month for the rest of your life. And then when you die, you'll have X amount left over for your heirs, or if you don't want to leave anything behind. So you can create an income plan. But to me, that's like way down the road. I don't want to wait that long. So I'm like right in the middle now. I'm in my mid 40s. So I'm like, I don't want to wait till my retirement stuff kicks in. So I've started dabbling in more and more things where it's like, investing in other companies, investing in commercial real estate where you start getting distributions every quarter. And it's like, it gets addicting because it's like, oh, this is kind of fun. This is really cool. So
Yeah.
I think it's attainable for anybody, but the problem is people want to skip a step. And I tell them you have to do all your regular investing first and then build that up.
Got it. Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of people, well, one, when you think about passive income, a lot of people automatically default to real estate,
Mhm.
um, which can be passive, but it just depends on how you do it, because if you go out and buy a bunch of rental properties, um, which is not necessarily a bad thing, it's depending on how you have it set up, it may not
It's
be all
not
that
passive.
passive.
Yeah, I
Um,
had one rental property back in the day. My wife said if I ever buy another one, she's gonna leave me because it was horrible. I mean,
yeah.
we had a perfect tenant in there, and when they moved out, we got the nightmare tenant, and it's just like, oh my God. It's like I never want to go through this again. So now I look for things where I can invest money into real estate where it's like literally I have no say in anything. I can't even like vote on anything. I get no say, but I get my distribution check, and I'm like, okay,
Yep.
this is the greatest thing ever.
Yes. So when you start to look at like some of the, commercial real estate syndications that are out there, those can be totally passive,
Mhm.
because the general partner or whoever's putting it together is the one that's doing all the legwork.
Yep.
So I think it's important when you look at passive income to just think about and make sure you understand all the aspects of that particular investment to really determine, is it as passive as you think it might be.
Exactly.
I want to ask you another thing about this, because I think a lot of people in the finance space, get people to think about, well, how much money do you need saved, which I've always thought is a little bit backwards, because if you think about passive income, if you have enough passive income to cover your expenses each and every month, I've always been of the opinion it doesn't really freaking matter how much money you have saved. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree that we're kind of dealt this, and I was part of that system too, where it's like, okay, you got to put all your money away, you got to save it for the next 40 years. And like my wife used to get frustrated because I had like an addiction to like saving and investing money. It was not a healthy addiction. I had friends who were like, oh, okay, if we don't eat lunch, we can do this and then do this. We get an extra 1% in there. And then when I'm 70, I'll have this much. And then which is fine and everything, but then things happen in life and you see people start passing away and you're like, oh my God, this person did nothing. They waited till they wanted to wait till they were 70 and they died at 68. It's like they never got to enjoy stuff. So I've been in the thing of like, okay, entrepreneurship, create a life I want, do the things I want to do. I still always tell people it's like you still have to cover the basics, still be investing because I want to have that nest egg. But at the same time, I'm trying to build passive income right now between now and like me personally, between now and 50. So I want to have it when I'm 50 that I can live off of the passive income, not touch the investments, and then just do whatever I want to do.
Yeah.
And when you see that it's attainable, it's really cool because other doors start opening up. It's like, I mean, we could talk about this for hours and hours and days, but once you get to accredited investor level, the world opens up. It's absolutely insane. It's like you start seeing deals where you're like, what is this? Oh my God, this is cool. Like, how come nobody knows about this? And because they don't tell us, they don't teach us these things. And
Yeah.
then when you get to that level, it's like you can get access to so many more deals that and then you start figuring it out. You're like, this is how people with money make more money, is they just invest in their friends that have really good businesses and then they just get checks. I'm like, they should teach us this in high school.
Yes, they should. Now, for people that don't know, accredited investor, um, what does that mean?
Credit investor, and this is a big controversy right now because they actually want to raise it, which I think is the biggest load of. I won't swear on here, but
Yeah.
it's unbelievable if they try to raise it. So, accredited investor currently is you have to have $1 million net worth, excluding your primary residence. Everybody wants to include their primary residence. For some reason, in the accredited investor calculation, they take it out. So, but the good thing is, talk to your accountant. It's easier a lot of times, especially if you have a business, because then you can factor in your investments, the value of your real estate, the value of your business, things like that. So, but once you get to that level, then it opens up. You can get into different angel investments. You can get into different other businesses that are looking to raise capital, where it's like,
Yeah.
you've probably heard the things like, oh, so-and-so's in the seed round or so-and-so's in the series B round. And it's like, people don't, it's literally, they're just raising money from anybody. They're just,
Yeah.
it's insane. And you look back at a guy like Gary Vee. I know I bring him up a lot because I love following his history because I've been following him for like a decade. But I mean, he was like an original investor. Like he was actually a real angel investor. Like he was buying into like Facebook and Twitter and all these things before they were public, when they were just regular companies. And that's where he made a huge amount of money. And obviously you're not probably going to find deals like that, but just being able to have access to things. Like for me, one of the deals we did is I was like, man, I want to diversify out of martial arts, out of fitness, or like that. So we did a deal this year that with a syndicate that's going to open 10 coffee and donut shops. And I was like, can't get much more different than that, and it
Yeah.
was essential. And we joked around about it. We were like, literally, this was an essential business during the pandemic. It was like, cool, yeah, coffee and donuts don't work out. This makes no sense. But I was like, man, if they're going to rig the game this way, that's one thing I've always learned from jiu-jitsu and MMA is know the rules, know the game, and then play it. So it's like, okay, these are the new rules. Cool. I'm going to start investing in things that you guys don't shut down.
Yeah.
Hopefully it never happens again, but now I'm paranoid.
No, well, it's things like the last few years that, they change your perspective, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because it's one thing to talk about diversification. It's a totally different thing to actually do it and follow it.
Oh yeah.
And it's there's a gentleman that I follow, Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU, super smart guy, he's a marketing person. And he, one of the things he talked about with diversification was, look, like I miss out on some of the home runs that are out there, right? Maybe my portfolio doesn't grow as large as it could be, but with diversification, if any one thing crashes, I'm not going to be sunk. I'm not going to be bankrupt. I'm okay. And that peace of mind that I can sleep at night, I'm good with.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So this has been a really interesting conversation, Paul. Any last minute thoughts you want to leave our audience with?
Man, just get started. The biggest thing, and I talk to people and I'll show like different charts and graphs and stuff, is compound. I mean, Einstein was a pretty smart guy. Eighth one of the world's compound interest. So it's like when you look at a chart, and this is why investing is so boring to some people, is like the first 10 years you're putting money away and it's not doing much. I mean, it's like just and then 20 years, and all of a sudden at about the 30-year mark, it just starts going like this, and it just keeps going up, up, and up because it's compounding so fast. And the problem is, a lot of us run out of time because we wait too long, and you never get to experience the compounding, or we panic and people are like, "Oh, the sky is falling, sell everything," and then they sell at the bottom and buy at the top. So we do it backwards. So man, just get started, ignore the noise, and just keep investing and just keep building your future. Educate yourself, but you got to start, and just start and don't stop. Make it automatic. Set up automations to do it so you don't have to deal with it, and then just let it go.
Yeah. When you work with business owners, what does that typically look like?
Right now, when we work with them, it's usually a group coaching and then some individual stuff where we go through and look at their business and what they do. Because in our industry, in like the gym industry, you can boil all the numbers down. Like, okay, we have this system. We're going to go in, implement this. This is their marketing system. This is your appointment setting system. This is your sales system. And then when you start looking at their numbers, you can always figure out like where their flaw is. And it's like, okay, if you fix this one of these 4 things, it's going to give you exponential return. And then you're going to start making more money, being able to do more things. And then they're like, oh, hey, I'm making more money. I'm like, cool. Now let's start investing it, start pulling your money out every quarter and building off of that.
How long do you typically work with them in a coaching program?
Man, it's pretty crazy. If they're not very motivated and they don't want to listen, it's a month or 2 and then they're out. Oh, this doesn't work. Facebook ads don't work. The typical excuses people give. Yeah. And it's like, but then we have some that have been with us since day one. We've got a couple clients that have been with us like 5 years because they're like, well, I'm not going anywhere because I keep learning stuff and you guys keep helping me. And then we started doing different projects together. So yeah, we've had, some as long as we've been in business, which is super cool. That's a good testament, I think.
Most definitely. So if people want to learn more, where should they be going, Paul?
Man, the best place is my Instagram. I give away a lot of free content on there, and then a lot of motivational stuff too. Just go to Instagram.com/Paul_Halme, or my website's good too. We're redoing that right now. But so Instagram's the best place. I like to put a lot of content out. And then in my stories, I'm always kind of goofing off behind the scenes and traveling and doing stuff. So, but yeah, just that's the spot.
Awesome. So guys, that is Paul. If you go to Instagram, you can always search at paul.halme, which is HALME, or go to paulhalme.com. Obviously you got an interesting past, man. You've learned from the ups and downs, and you're practicing what you preach. So I appreciate you sharing your experience, your knowledge with our audience, and definitely look forward to connecting again. For those that are watching, listening, I appreciate you doing so. My name is Tim Fitzpatrick again with Rialto Marketing. If you guys if you want to see consistent, repeatable results with your marketing, you have to have a plan. There is no perfect plan, but you got to start somewhere. As Paul said, you got to just start doing it. If you want to get our 90-day marketing plan kit, go to growthmarketingplan.com. That's growthmarketingplan.com. And you can download our 90-day marketing plan kit. All the tools, templates are there to help you get started, because man, in the absence of a plan, everything looks like an opportunity, and you're just going to waste time and you're going to waste money. So head on over to growthmarketingplan.com to get that. Again, till next time, take care. See ya.
Thanks, Jim.